The segment that we've come up with out of thin air for today, what's more likely? But thank you, Ben Roethlisberger and the Pittsburgh Steelers, for giving us our first item. We spent more than a half hour talking about it last hour. Let's kick off what's more likely with this simple question. Myles, what's more likely? Ben Roethlisberger plays for the Steelers or plays for someone else in 2021? And just so you're aware of the rules of the game here, you may be tempted to say no one. No one's the middle ground. No, it's either plays for the Steelers or plays for someone else. What's more likely?
I think it's more likely that he plays for the Steelers. I would say that he's going to play for the Steelers, or he's probably not going to play. Because as we were going on in the last hour, I just don't know who exactly is really going to be interested in him enough that you're going to bring him in and say, yes, you're going to be our starting quarterback, and you're the one piece that can take us over the top. I don't really know that there are many teams that would say that unless you are the Steelers and you already have that built-in loyalty with somebody like Ben Roethlisberger, who's been there for over a decade, won Super Bowls for you. I think that it makes a lot of sense for them to try it one more time if they can work it out rather than him going somewhere else. I don't necessarily see him going somewhere else as being more likely than him playing with the Steelers.
I agree with you completely. He's going to play for the Steelers or play for no one else, in large part because we struggled last hour to come up with a short list of teams that would at least stop and think about the possibility of pursuing Ben Roethlisberger. Now, I could say that we're just going to fully milk this cow by having another Ben Roethlisberger question, or I could admit that I screwed up the first question. I will choose to admit that I screwed up the first question because what it was supposed to be was what's more likely, Ben Roethlisberger plays for the Steelers or retires. So let's try it from that angle, just in the interest of variety and or covering up my screw-up. Myles, what's more likely? He plays for the Steelers or retires?
I think it's more likely that he plays for the Steelers than he retires, in part because if he does retire, then he technically owes the Steelers money. And right. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to owe anybody that much money. I just wouldn't want to owe anybody that much money if I retire. And, they could probably work it out so that he could keep it or whatever, but I don't know about owing people money if I retire.
Let's drill down one more level then, and this is not the result of anyone's screw-up. What's more likely, he plays for the Steelers or they cut him?
Oh, man, now you're going to make me answer this one again. I don't think that they want to cut him. I don't think they want to.
Whatever the word is, a mutual agreement, whatever the word is, I think right now, based on the way Kevin Colbert spoke yesterday, I think he's getting everyone ready for what's coming. And what's coming is we just can't figure our way out of this maze. We've tried. We've looked at it every way we possibly can. We'd love to have him back. But given the salary cap, given the pandemic, they'll blame 50 things other than we're just deciding it's time to move on. I really do think that's where this is going. They're going to move on, and he's going to move out, and he's not going to play for anyone else. And in 5 years, we start having the conversation of whether or not he gets into the Hall of Fame, and he should. All right, let's move on. What's more likely, Dwayne Haskins revives his career in Pittsburgh, or he's not on the Week 1 roster?
Oh, it's that he's not on the Week 1 roster. I mean, until he proves that he's matured more than what he showed when he was in Washington, then, I don't know that there's any other way I can answer the question. I mean, he just... The maturity thing was huge there. And you don't necessarily cut a guy that you pick in the middle of the first round that's a quarterback unless you really believe that he has to go. And I think the only way that really happens is if there's a maturity issue. So from that perspective, he's got a lot to prove in Pittsburgh. And I would say at this point, it's much more likely that he's just not on that Week 1 roster.
I'm going to disagree with you because really? I think he got the wake-up call. And sometimes you need to get cut to get the wake-up call early in your career. Look at what it did for Chris Carter when the Eagles cut him. Now, that was before you were born, but I'm sure you have access to Google. But Chris Carter played for the Eagles, and he had substance abuse issues. And that was when Buddy Ryan coined the phrase, all he does is catch touchdowns. He was covering for Chris Carter's substance abuse issues when he cut him. He lands with the Vikings via the waiver system. He actually wanted to go to the Giants, and he becomes a Hall of Famer there. So sometimes you need, and I think that's why teams will give a guy a second chance, a third chance. They want the guy to have his epiphany while he's still employed by the team that originally invested in him. And Washington made the huge investment, the 15th overall pick in the draft. And they tried. They just decided they had enough. And I think maybe this wake-up call for Dwayne Haskins, because, look, if it doesn't work here, where else is it going to work? And of all the teams you could land with in the NFL, this is the Pittsburgh Steelers, for crying out loud. Maybe he gets himself in the right mindset, does the right things, coaching staff works with him, and he proves to them and to himself that he's matured. These guys get thrust into pro football at such an early age. And he was, I think, younger than most. He was like 21-ish. And sometimes it takes a little while. The brain is still developing for anyone in their early 20s. And I think it's more likely he revives his career. Now, that's misleading because that would assume he had a career to revive in the first place. But, we saw flashes. We had reason to believe that there could be something there, and I think he could get that back. And when you look at all the depth charts he could have been on, Mason Rudolph and Josh Dobbs, he's going to have a chance to stand out. So at least we disagree on one. It'll be interesting to see what Dwayne Haskins becomes. And, if they think they have something in Dwayne Haskins, it makes it easier to move on without Ben Roethlisberger. All right, there's a report that the Broncos have not contacted the agents for Von Miller or Kareem Jackson, who have option payments due this year. Now, again, there's no reason to talk if we don't know what the cap's going to be. But Von Miller is due to make $18 million in the final year of his contract. He didn't play at all last year. I don't think he's going to be on the team. What's more likely? Von Miller is on the team, or Deshaun Watson is on the Denver Broncos team. What's more likely?
Oh, I love this. Because I don't necessarily think that Von Miller is going to be there either, but I think it's probably more likely that Von Miller and the Broncos work something out and figure out how they can keep him on that team. And, Von Miller doesn't necessarily have to go anywhere and he can still be where he's comfortable. I think that's more likely than Deshaun Watson somehow making his way to Denver because Denver trades 3 first-round picks or 4 first-round picks and Drew Lock to the Texans, and they agree to that. I don't know that Denver has the right ammo in order to land Deshaun Watson. So I almost feel like it's more likely that Von Miller will be back because he's got that familiarity with the team and somehow they can work it out.
I continue to be fascinated, though, by what Drew Lock did to the Texans December of 2019 when the Broncos weren't good. They haven't been good since they won the Super Bowl, and the Texans were a playoff team. Drew Lock went in there and had a great game. That was the Buzz Lightyear game. You're Buzz Lightyear is not before your time, right? You're at least on board with me with Buzz Lightyear. Yes. He threw the touchdown pass, and he's doing the Buzz Lightyear stuff, and it's like Drew Lock, this is great personality, who's got the potential to be a franchise quarterback. He showed that all in Houston against the Texans. So maybe the Broncos have, in addition to the draft picks, a guy that they could dangle that could get folks in Houston, specifically the 2 guys who run the show, Cal McNair and Jack Easterby, who were there for what happened in 2019, to say, hey, maybe we'd like this Drew Lock guy to be our starting quarterback if Deshaun Watson really doesn't want to be here. So I say it's more likely Deshaun Watson will be on the team. I think Von Miller, all he has to say is, no, I'm not redoing my deal. He gets a free ticket to the open market, and he can go join one of the super teams and try to pursue another Super Bowl ring. John Robinson, the GM of the Titans, recently spoke to reporters and addressed the issues with the team's pass rush. Here's some of what Robinson had to say.
We tried to put a plan together last year with building a team and adding some players. And, there were some players that came on the team in free agency that bought in and were about what we're about. And there's some that it didn't work for a myriad of reasons. But I think that's a position that, we're definitely interested in and would love to have a guy that commands double teams and gets 2 sacks. I mean, at the end of the day, the players are the ones that make the plays. And we got to try to get as many of them as possible. Jadeveon did some good things for us last year before he got dinged with some disruptive plays. The statistical piece might not have, gleaned, but he was a disruptive player on the edge for us.
John Robinson was referring to Vic Beasley when he was talking about guys that just didn't work out. Jadeveon Clowney was kind of working out until he got injured, and the story on Jadeveon Clowney is always the same. His performance doesn't scream out from the stat sheet, but it does on the film because he is disruptive. He F's the play up, as Sims likes to say, and Clowney is the topic of our next question here. What's more likely? Clowney has a productive but injury-shortened year in 2021, or he gives a team a full 16 or 17, and it's probably going to be 17 game season.
Ooh, I think it's more likely that he has a productive but injury-shortened year. I think that's kind of been the story on him for a lot of his career. He gets injured. He's able to wreck things. I mean, he's one of these game wrecker guys, but he also sometimes just doesn't put up the numbers. And I think sometimes that's because, teams know that they have to scheme against him, and so they try to do his best to take him out. But I think he still can be a productive kind of guy. But I mean, I don't know. Especially if it's a 17-game season, I kind of find it hard to think that he would be healthy over the course of a 17-game season, because it's just not necessarily something that he's been able to do all that much.
He had that microfracture surgery in his knee early in his career, and you do that and I don't want to go too far down the medical path, because when I do, I inevitably make a mistake. But I've been around this long enough to know that the microfracture surgery is intended to address a situation where there is no cartilage in one area or large areas of the knee. You use the microfracture to use, and this is where I start getting off my skis here or over my skis, but they simulate cartilage growth through scar tissue, and that becomes the cushioning among the bones. You do that early in your career. What do you got after 6, 7, 8 years? What's really going on inside that knee? And this is a guy who's had a long list of injuries. And look, hey, it happens. It happens. But when he's healthy, he's as disruptive as anyone in the NFL. I agree with you. It's more likely he does have a productive but injury-shortened year. And the question is, how smitten will someone be to cough up the money for the chance to do business with Jadeveon Clowney? And he's been kind of bouncing around 1 year at a time the past few years. He's going to probably have to do a 1-year deal with someone again this year, as he keeps waiting for the big payday that he never really got. He got it as the first overall pick in the draft, but that payday isn't what it used to be. He never got the free agency payday or the second contract that he may have earned early in his career. All right, what's more likely in Atlanta? Matt Ryan and Julio Jones are a top 5 combination under Arthur Smith, or neither one is on the team in after 2021.
I think it's that neither one is on the team after 2021. And unfortunately, I think that the thing is right now, we just talked about Jadeveon Clowney and the injuries. Look, I think Julio Jones, we've got to see if he can be healthy again over a 16-week season or 17-game season, as we were just talking about. I think when you looked at what he did this year, it was one of the first years he's ever had that he didn't get to 1,000 yards. And I remember, writing about it each week, as it would be like, oh, is he going to play? Is he going to play? Because if he doesn't, he's going to, not be able to reach this 1,000-yard mark. And it's just been something that he's so consistently done. I don't know how he's going to be able to do that next year. And as I'm hearing myself say this, like I think of the Atlanta Falcons next year after Julio Jones, has a Pro Bowl year, and they're going to be like, look at all these detractors. I'm going to be like Tom Brady on this Freezing Cold Takes video. But I'm not sure if they're going to be able to get there with him this next year. And Matt Ryan is not getting any younger either. He was going to be 36 in May. And I think the Arthur Smith offense could be good for both of those guys, but I just feel like it's more likely that those two guys are going to be moved on from in the near future, because they want to have something where they can build for the next 10, 15 years, as opposed to maybe the next 3.
We talked earlier about how the Steelers are paying for the sins of salary cap pass. They're really paying for it in Atlanta, as they were in that Super Bowl window. Do what you can to keep the team together. Do what you can to make Matt Ryan happy, and then do what you can to make Julio Jones happy. Once Matt Ryan got to $30 million a year and Julio was at 15, that's when he started clamoring for more. He finally got more. It has created a cap problem. They're going to have a cap nightmare with or without Ryan and Jones. I think they just decided, let's do it one more time with Ryan and Jones, because either way, we have a mess here. And maybe that's a team that can attract some of these one-year free agents and fill out the roster. Because here's the other side of it. Once guys start taking these one-year contracts with teams, they're going to fill up spots on the depth chart. So, there will be a point where if you're a guy who wants to play and you look at the roster of the Bucs, of the Packers, of the Chiefs, of the Seahawks, of the Rams, of whoever, and you say, I'm not sure I'm going to get on the field, and then you look at the Falcons roster and say, boy, I'm going to get on the field there, that's going to make some of these lesser teams who have other key parts attractive to guys who are available in free agency. Alex Smith, the Washington quarterback for now, recently told The Ringer, I've got a lot of room for growth on the field. So what's more likely? Alex Smith starts at least 8 games in 2021, or is a backup quarterback for the whole season?
I mean, I know I can't push, but can he start 8 games as a backup quarterback somewhere? Because I could see that happening in some sort of way. I think he can be one of the most high-quality backups in the league. And I'm talking about guys like Nick Foles, who probably should be a high-quality backup. Case Keenum, another one of those guys where the Browns have him now, really high-quality backup where you want him on your team if you know that you might need, if something happens to your quarterback, heavens forbid, then he's going to be able to at least get you to a place where you can consistently still win games at a decent baseline. But if you're competing for a championship, Alex Smith, I don't think is the guy that you want as your quarterback. He's 37 years old. He's obviously coming off a devastating leg injury. And, Lord knows he should have been the comeback player of the year. And I'm very glad that he was. However, if you're really counting on Alex Smith to be a starting quarterback, I don't think you're in a position where you can say, yes, we are going to be a championship team. Maybe you want him as a bridge guy. I don't know. But I think he should be probably at this point in his career a very high-quality backup.
I still want to know who voted for Ben Roethlisberger instead of Alex Smith for the Comeback Player of the Year award. It was 49 for Smith and 1 for Ben, and I don't think the name ever came out. It should, because that person deserves to be properly ridiculed. I've been struggling with the Alex Smith thing, and I've mentioned previously that when I see him play, I feel like I did when I used to see my kid play, where I'm just constantly worried that he's going to get hurt because of the experience with the broken leg from a few years ago. It dawned on me, though, recently when I was thinking about, trying to understand why the Bears would want Carson Wentz. They don't have many other options, but Alex Smith would make sense because of the Matt Nagy connection back to Kansas City. Alex Smith knows that offense. He's been around so long, he knows every offense, but he thrived in Kansas City. And I think now they got to a ceiling with Alex Smith that they knew they weren't going to bust through, and then they found Patrick Mahomes and they busted through it. But the Bears are so far below the ceiling the Chiefs were at. If you're talking about finding a way to keep guys gainfully employed while they continue to plot the long-term answer at quarterback, Alex Smith makes a lot of sense to me. He makes more sense than Nick Foles. He makes more sense than Carson Wentz because he's going to cost a lot less than Wentz, and you're not going to have to trade for him. I think Washington's going to cut Smith. He's got a big salary, non-guaranteed. I think that he makes a ton of sense for the Chicago Bears. It's one of those where you think about it, and then all of a sudden it's like, I should have realized this from the get-go. Alex Smith to the Bears, and if he does, I say he's going to start at least 8 games in 2021.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think from that perspective, where it's the Bears, I think he does make a lot more sense for them than a Carson Wentz, where it's more of where Carson Wentz is a reclamation project. Alex Smith, you just know, he knows that offense. He knows Matt Nagy. He's going to come in there. But also, I think about Alex Smith and the fact that Kansas City had to bust through that ceiling. There was a year where Alex Smith, and I think Matt Nagy was still there in Kansas City, where he didn't throw a touchdown pass to a wide receiver. And some of that was Kansas City's personnel. And since then they've gotten a lot better at the wide receiver position. But I don't think that would make Chicago a real contender, but I think it would probably keep people gainfully employed. And if you're Chicago and you're Matt Nagy, then that is something that you definitely have to think about, because the Bears were considering moving on from the front office and that, the whole football operation at that point when they're at the end of the season. So yeah, I think that it would make sense from that perspective for the Bears.
Yeah, I think everybody's on notice, and the Bears fans are upset, and they need something to make them feel better about the team. And Alex Smith brings a cachet in a weird sort of way where there's so much respect for him, and he's a beloved figure in the NFL. So you bring him to your team. It's not like anybody's going to boo Alex Smith. It's not like anybody is going to complain that they got Alex Smith. Now, yeah, look, there's always going to be that fringe of the fan base that'll complain about everything. But I just think that Alex Smith makes a ton of sense for the Bears. And if that's where he goes, then I'll take 8 games. All right, this last one is a very important topic. Carefully crafted by our producer, Matt Casey. Tim Tebow announced last night his retirement from baseball after a 5-year quest to make it to the show with the New York Mets. So what's more likely now that Tim Tebow has retired from baseball and has suggested that there are other things he wants to do with his time? These are a couple of football possibilities. What's more likely? Tim Tebow joins Urban Meyer's staff as the director of sports performance. That's a position that became available last Friday. Or he's hired by Jack Easterby as a special advisor to the Houston Texans. What's more likely?
I don't necessarily know what Tim Tebow's strength and conditioning regimens are, and I'm sure that Urban Meyer still loves him, but I'm going to go with Jack Easterby.
He's huge. He's huge. I don't care what his methods are. They work.
You don't know, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for everybody. I don't know. You're going to hire Alex Guerrero for everybody, although maybe you should. I don't know.
Yes.
But I think he's going to go with
Yeah. I want to hire Alex Guerrero.
I do too, really. And I'm still young. I wouldn't know. I'm going with Jack Easterby and the Houston Texans. They've got the Patriots connection from 2013. That was the one year that Tim Tebow was with.
Well done.
Yeah.
Well done.
And
Good
Easterby,
pull.
that was his first year as their character coach back then. So that's where I'm going. They've already got the connections.
And look, at this point, the Texans need anything that they can get to rebuild the reputation of the team is completely and totally dysfunctional. The reality, though, is plenty of us who already regard the Texans as dysfunctional would regard them as even more dysfunctional if they carve out some job for the latest of Jack Easterby's buddies to come work for the team. I'm fascinated by the possibility he's going to end up with Urban Meyer in some capacity. Who knows? Maybe as a backup quarterback. You never know. You never know. Look, there's still this sense he was wrongfully deprived of his NFL career. He's only 33. He's 10 years younger than Tom Brady, for crying out loud. Put the guy back on the field. I want excitement. That would be exciting to see Tebow back in uniform. I'm being told to shut up about the possibility of Tebow back on a football field. It could be worse. He could be playing for the Jets, Matt Casey. Let's take a break.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.